Good evening, I'm Sejal Govindarao.
And I'm Stefan Nye.
And this is Capital News. Here are tonight's stories. The 2024 election is heating up, but can the American people trust the polls? And what role will candidates' ages play in this presidential rematch?
And the nationwide mental health crisis hits home in D.C. Plus, we take a look at how George Washington University is arming police officers and a special report into the origins of the deadly fentanyl crisis. All that and more on Capital News.
But first, we turn to the war in Gaza. The conflict has become a major issue ahead of the 2024 U.S. presidential election, especially among Arab and Muslim American voters who are dissatisfied with how President Joe Biden is handling the war. Nicholas Anastasio joins us in the studio for more. Nicholas?
Sejal, while Biden is the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee for 2024, hundreds of thousands of voters are turning out to indicate their disapproval of Biden's handling of the war in Gaza. Activists have organized sizable anti-Biden campaigns in states with some of the largest share of Arab and Muslim American voters in the country, like Michigan and Minnesota. But the question ahead of November is whether those voters will come out to vote.
You know, I always tell people I never want to put anyone in the position where you have to convince people why your people deserve humanity and life. And that's basically where we have been in for the last almost 6 months now.
As the Israel-Hamas war carries on in Gaza, Arab and Muslim American voters in the United States, especially Palestinian Americans, are criticizing the U.S.'s handling of the war, looking to voice their frustrations at the ballot box in Democratic primaries across the country.
The main thing that we're advocating for is a permanent and lasting ceasefire in Gaza, increased humanitarian aid to Gaza, cutting funding for Israel, or at least putting conditional funding for Israel.
In New Jersey, a state known for its sizable Arab and Muslim American population, pro-Palestinian activists are mounting an uncommitted voting campaign against President Joe Biden ahead of the state's June 4th primary, looking to emulate prior campaigns in states like Michigan and Minnesota.
I will not vote for Joe Biden. I think that he has betrayed a genocidal approach to this violence.
And while Biden is the presumptive nominee in the general, activists are looking to challenge the strength of his support, demonstrating themselves as a significant voting bloc for Biden to hold on to ahead of November.
You know, just shown that he does not care and he's unwilling to use the power that he has. And I hope that the Democratic Party finds a better candidate.
While New Jersey has been considered a relatively safe state for Democrats historically, it offers a snapshot into how Arab and Muslim American voters feel about Biden's presidency and the handling of the war in Gaza, indicating whether they will come out and vote in November or not. Back to you, Stefan.
Thanks, Nicholas. And now Charlene Richards gives us an update on the 2024 presidential election.
24 and the presumptive nominees for the general election are underway, leading with former President Donald Trump.
He's risking your lives, he's risking your jobs, but he doesn't care because all he cares about is the Green New Scam, the Green New Deal, the Green New Scam.
And President Joe Biden.
Because unlike Donald Trump, I know who we are as Americans. It's why I promised to have an administration that looks like America.
Together, the two presidential candidates represent a stark political divide in American history, amid state Supreme Court's decisions regarding the ban of abortion.
This is not a pro-life movement. This is a pro-zombie movement.
Ceasefire protests amid the ongoing war in Gaza.
All he has to do is call for a ceasefire.
And the issue of immigration, an issue that President Biden has set to support, with Trump calling a threat to the country.
Laken Riley would be alive today if Joe Biden had not willfully and maliciously eviscerated the borders of the United States.
Polls show a tight race between the two candidates, finding registered voters nationwide split across the middle. 46% of voters in favor of Trump and 45% for Biden, according to a recent New York Times and Siena College poll.
Sejal and Stefan, a lot is up in the air right now regarding the upcoming general election. Right now, President Biden's approval ratings are plummeting in the negatives, with him at a high 59% in disapproval and a low 38% in approval ratings. Not just that, but 64% of registered voters believe that the U.S. is heading in the wrong direction. With these stark numbers in mind, Joe Biden is preparing to set off a strong campaign in battleground Pennsylvania, a state where Donald Trump is also set to make a few appearances at campaign rallies, despite his hush money criminal trial beginning officially just this Monday. So as you can tell, there are still many primaries to go in different states here in the U.S., so the race to the finish line in this election is still yet to be determined. But there are still a lot of battleground races underway, and we will just have to see how it all plays out. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Charlene. The presidential election is getting closer, but how much can people trust the polls? Sean Lee has the story.
In an era when public opinion and polling data are more influential than ever, experts like Justin Wallen are at the forefront of decoding what this means for our society and democracy. As we approach another election year, various new and updated polls will be posted from diverse fields of study.
Or for a candidate in a race, polling would be what we normally think of in a horse race, right? So Trump is here, Biden is here, who's going to sort out at the end of the day when the...
At polling centers across the nation, every vote cast is a voice seeking to be heard, a crucial component of the democratic process Wallen examines closely. Through the lens of data, Wallen unravels the story behind the numbers, offering insights into public opinion's changing landscape and its impacts on policy and elections. Justin Wallen, a political analyst and pollster, bridges the gap between raw data and the human stories it represents, guiding us through the complexities of modern-day polling.
Sentiment changes, ever evolving, and that's why polls are conducted over and over and over again. Okay. And in political races, even lesser funded political races, you're going to do several polls over the course of the race. Those that are more sophisticated presidential races spend millions of dollars on polls, and they're doing polls cyclically, day on day on day and day and day, and they're building on that. So it's a terrific question. No, polls have a shelf life. In public policy, they have a longer shelf life. They may have 3 months or 4 months, maybe even 6 months.
In the heated arena of political discourse, Wallen's expertise sheds light on how polls influence not just voter perception, but also policy decision and election outcomes. Beyond the numbers, it's the reaction from communities across the country that truly defines the significance of polling. Some folks from GW community also had input on polling and what their experience was like.
At the Georgia state primaries, and I remember I just got a text message from a group, I forgot the specific name of it, and it asked to take a poll of who you thought was going to be like the candidate.
2 presidential elections, the polls were very inaccurate compared to what actually happened. So in those, I would say they're not indicative.
You don't exist. Is that fair? Should your thought matter? Your thought doesn't matter. Policyholders and pollsters only care about those people who are probably going to turn out there to vote.
As we wrap up reflecting on insights from Justin Wallen, our journey through polling in stations, polling research, and dynamic discussions on media coverage, it's clear that the pulse of the nation, captured through polls and public engagement, is what truly shapes our democratic landscape. I'm Sean Lee from Washington.
And to talk more about what's going on in our political landscape today, we're joined by Logan Dobson, the current Executive Vice President of Targeted Victory, a GOP communications firm. Logan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here.
So you've previously worked on Capitol Hill. Obviously, we know it's been a rather busy week. I'm wondering what you make of the recent threat of a motion to vacate Speaker Johnson if Ukraine aid comes to the floor.
Yeah, I think that what you're seeing are the consequences of having a very closely divided Congress. When you talk about a House Republican majority that only has, depending on who calls in sick that day, 1 or 2 or 3 vote majorities on any given issue, the ability of any one member to sort of throw the body into chaos is obviously raised because it doesn't take that many members of Congress to go the other way to make that threat sort of viable. I think that on any given issue of controversy that comes before the overall Congress, there's probably always going to be 1 or 2 members of the House Republican Conference and the House Democratic Conference that sees the issue differently perhaps than leadership does. And so I think that what you're seeing here is Speaker Johnson trying to do his best to navigate, a situation where he obviously came into the job in a sort of chaotic manner, having to go through almost a dozen ballots to pick a new speaker after Speaker McCarthy was removed. So I don't know that it's necessarily surprising. I think that you could generally have predicted that there would be controversies like this and threats of additional motions to vacate. And what will be interesting is to see whether the House as a whole body sort of can come together to pass these issues that are of great importance to all the representatives.
Mm-hmm. And one topic of conversation is that if Ukraine aid does make it to the floor, then Democrats might be saving Speaker Johnson. So what do those optics mean for him as a speaker if Democrats come to his rescue?
Well, I think that the Speaker of the House is always going to see themselves as the leader of their party's conference in the House, first and foremost. And so therefore, he's going to pay most attention to what his members are looking for, what is happening, what is being discussed in those conference meetings. I don't know that you can operate from a position where you are excessively concerned about the optics in a situation like that. I think that Speaker Johnson is probably just going to do whatever he thinks is right, and if something comes up for a vote, then he'll deal with that then. But when you are the leader of a party in Congress, you can't really ever, one, rely on members of the other party, and that's not a pejorative statement about members of the other party. It's not their job to support you in your leadership. But two, if as the leader of House Republicans, you start worrying about what you're going to do to get House Democratic support, then that kind of puts you in a very awkward position with your own conference, and your own conference needs to be that home base of support. So I think that he'll continue to operate trying to advance the goals of the House Republican Conference as best he can. Obviously, he'll probably face some controversy and some, like I said earlier, some people who disagree with those decisions in any given instant. But he can't really operate as if he is trying to appeal to Democrats, because that's not tenable for him as the leader of the House Republicans.
And I want to ask you a little bit about what's going on in the other chamber on Capitol Hill. You spent a little bit of time in the Senate. Mm-hmm. What do you make of this Mayorkas impeachment trial? It's poised to be dismissed. Do you think that'll help Republicans strengthen their campaign points on the border heading into 2024? Yeah,
I think that along with inflation, public polls are showing that immigration and border security is either the number one or number two issue for the American voters. I think that voters are seeing with their own eyes the sort of videos that are coming from the border. They're hearing about issues that illegal migrants are creating in cities where they're living. Issues of crime are linked up with that as well. And I think that anything that Republicans can do to raise the profile of that issue overall is good for them politically. I don't think that that's why they're doing that. I think that House Republicans genuinely think that Secretary Mayorkas has failed at his job and deserves to be impeached. And I think that for the most part, Senate Republicans seem to agree with that notion. But you're correct that, obviously the Senate is controlled by Democrats. And so at the end of the day, it's up to them whether or not the impeachment sort of proceeds. But from a purely political standpoint, I think that anything that raises the issue of immigration, the issue of border security, and critically the Biden administration's failures on those fronts will probably accrue to Republicans' benefits in the coming elections.
Well, Logan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. On to another major topic ahead of the 2024 election, the ages of Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It's become a major issue in both of their campaigns. So take a look at Capitol News. Capitol News' Alex Ashley has the story.
With the 2024 election quickly approaching, the age of the two candidates remains a big question with voters. A New York Times and Siena College poll conducted in early March found that 42% of registered voters believe Donald Trump is too old to be an effective president. For President Biden, that number was 73%. That survey came just a month after a Justice Department special counsel report called the president a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. But on Super Tuesday, both former President Trump and President Biden faced little opposition. The race is shaping up to be a rematch of the 2020 election. For prospective voters, that is concerning.
Way too old, way beyond age. I think we need somebody younger in office.
But in President Biden's State of the Union address, he remained adamant that his age was not a problem.
My fellow Americans, the issue facing our nation isn't how old we are, it's how old are our ideas.
The president also joked about his age during the speech, prompting laughs from Republicans and Democrats in the chamber.
I know it may not look like it, but I've been around a while. When you get to be my age, certain things become clearer than ever.
And while the president gave a strong address, it was not enough to reassure voters come November.
I just think at a certain point, like, your memory is no good, your sight's no good, your hearing's no good.
With the 2024 election getting closer every month, one big issue for all voters is still the age of both candidates. Donald Trump and Joe Biden at 77 and 81 are the oldest two candidates to be running for their parties in history, but both are still expected to be their party's nominee. This race will continue through November, and we will see what happens. In Washington, I'm Alex Ashley.
Independent and third-party candidates are hoping to win the White House. This year's presidential election isn't just between Biden and Trump. While the group No Labels ended its attempt at a bipartisan ticket earlier this month, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Cornel West, and Green Party candidate Jill Stein are still in the race. While experts say these candidates probably won't win the presidency themselves, they still could have a major impact on the election. The difference of a few thousand votes in swing states like Arizona, Georgia, or Wisconsin could help Trump get the electoral votes he needs to become president. And from politics in the district, we bring you to news in Indonesia. The country is struggling to address over-tourism, and Nicole Abati has the story.
Bali, Indonesia's arguably most famous city, is now implementing a tourist fee visa of 150,000 rupiah for any tourist entering the country for over 8 hours. Oki Miza, a well-known Indonesian influencer, speaks about the visa implementation and the reasons behind it.
On 14th of February 2024, tourist levy will be applied. It's 150,000 Indonesian rupiah, so equivalent to around $9.5 US.
Miza speaks about the importance of cultural awareness and respect that tourists need when visiting Bali.
I think it's a matter of behavior. It's about individual awareness of health and environment. I mean, you can throw millions of dollars, but if people don't have those awareness, it won't work.
The Tourism and Creative Economy Minister Sandiaga Uno said in a statement that the levy is expected to enhance information services related to Bali's cultural tourism, simultaneously contributing to the development of quality infrastructure and public transportation facilities. However, there has been some speculations regarding the implementation of the fee, since there has been multiple incidents of disrespect caused by the Russian tourists who have come to Bali after the war with Ukraine started and have been working there without visas, have been stealing motorbikes and other items, as well as have been disrespectful to Bali's culture and its people. Bali immigration authorities have deported 101 foreigners from 31 countries in the past 4 months. Russians account for almost a third of those deportations.
Russians are looking for a good place for relocation now, so Bali is a good choice.
Because of this behavior, Indonesian authorities stopped the visa on arrival policy for Russians and Ukrainians. Now they must apply in advance for a 60-day tourist visa. The new fee for tourists has definitely made a stance on the importance of cultural respect in Bali, and we can only hope that people will follow through. In Washington, D.C., this is Nicole Abati.
Some travelers are changing flights to avoid Boeing airplanes. This comes after a series of quality control incidents, like the door panel blowout that happened mid-air on an Alaskan Airlines flight in January. Nervous flyers are now turning to non-Boeing planes. Although aviation-related deaths are at an all-time low, some travelers are still choosing to rearrange flights to be on planes other than Boeing.
And 4 years after the COVID-19 pandemic, people around the world are struggling to cope with the aftermath of the virus. The percentage of people experiencing anxiety or depression is 2 times the number of pre-pandemic levels. And that's according to a survey done in January by the Census Bureau and National Center for Health Statistics. Suicide and drug overdoses are also at record levels in the United States. The nationwide mental health crisis is also playing out in our nation's capital. After a police shooting, community members are speaking up about how D.C. responds to people in crisis. Nusha Flore has the details.
Mental health crisis calls are on the rise in D.C., but the way that police handle these situations have recently been called into question. This is after a man in crisis named Clifford Brooks was shot and killed by a D.C. police officer.
Some of this is going to come down to how much do we value life.
The officer spent several hours trying to de-escalate the situation and send Brooks to the hospital for treatment. Brooks came at him with the tire pressure gauge, leading to gunshots.
I definitely can appreciate that someone's trying to de-escalate a situation and it's taking several hours. But I also know that sometimes people de-escalate situations and it takes longer than that. And the outcome should almost never be that someone loses their life.
Nonprofit organizations such as Bread for the City, the ACLU of DC, and Miriam's Kitchen have filed lawsuits against the city for their use of police in mental health emergencies. They claim that people with mental health disabilities are discriminated against when police are sent to the scene instead of mental health professionals. The officer in this instance was said to be trained in handling mental health crises. The MPD declined to comment on this specific incident, but did highlight the training that their officers receive.
For over a decade now, I've been providing crisis intervention officer training, and we have about 20 to 30% of our force that's trained in crisis intervention, CIO officers, we call them. And that's training that's done by DBH, actually by the Department of Behavioral Health for the department. That's a 40-hour training block.
Dr. Malak emphasizes prevention and outpatient treatment, such as therapy and medications, as a main strategy to avoid these situations.
So the goal is not to put you in the hospital. The goal really is what can we do to manage this so you don't have to go in the hospital. So this is a much more upstream approach to prevent you from having a crisis in the first place.
I'm here at the corner of North Capitol Street and New York Avenue where the incident took place. The police officer who shot and killed the man is still under investigation. More updates are to come. I'm Nusha Flore for Capitol News in Washington.
The potential for police shootings has also become a topic of conversation at the George Washington University. The DC-based university started to arm campus police officers this semester, and Jacob Agers has the details.
As of February, GWPD has completed Stage 2 of its 5-part planning framework to arm George Washington University police officers. Right now, 7 GWPD supervisory officers have completed training and have been armed. Despite student outcry when the plan was first announced in April 2023, GWPD has continued the process to arm its officers. In Stage 2, GWPD officials have welcomed community feedback through opening nominations for a campus advisory committee and allowing for critiques on its use of force policy, which was updated to reflect these critiques on January 31st. The updated use of force policy did not change any requirements for use of deadly means, but it did specify new rules in the section on unauthorized use of force, to include rules against firing warning shots, firing from or at a moving vehicle, and disallowing any type of chokehold. Despite the updates that have occurred in Phase 2, some students still do not see a need to arm GWPD officers as they feel safe on the campus already.
As a black student on campus, I think it'll make me feel less safe, honestly. I just feel like it's over-policing for what?
Some students agree with the policy and feel that arming police as an active measure increases campus safety.
I think that by arming GWPD officers, we're putting in those preventive measures now. So in the case that they do need to respond to some sort of gun violence on campus, such as a shooting, they're able to more effectively secure students and protect our well-being.
According to Dakota Katula, who served on embassy duty in the United States Marine Corps and who is an expert on escalation of force, the level of effectiveness increases and probability of a fatal incident decreases with the level of training that police officers undergo.
Oh, there are certainly large risks, especially when the quality of training is poor. And I think that we see that across the U.S. where there's differing standards in the quality of training among police departments. For example, California tends to have lower qualities, especially in the metropolitan areas, mostly because they have a very high turnover rate of officers.
The final 3 stages in GWPD's plan to arm its officers are continuous training of officers, independent community review, and continued community engagement through the Campus Safety Advisory Committee. GWPD declined a request to comment.
I'm here in front of the GWPD campus station where the campus police department has been undergoing training to carry firearms. Despite student outcry, GWPD has reached Stage 2 of arming their officers, and the effects of this new policy remain to be seen. I'm Jacob Agers with Capitol News, Washington, D.C.
To speak more about armed police officers on campus, we have Steven Saltsburg in the studio to share more on the topic. Thanks for being here with us.
Glad to be here.
Now, this new move by GW is pretty controversial. How do you think arming police officers, the GWPD specifically, will affect campus safety?
I was originally opposed to arming police officers on campus, but the more I thought about it, the reality of the world we live in is that we face the risk that people with guns will come on campus. And all it takes is somebody with a high-powered weapon to get into a classroom and do an awful lot of damage. And there's no time for the Metropolitan Police to be sure they're going to get here. So on balance, I think it's probably it's a much better idea to arm police officers than to arm teachers. Because those of us, if we armed us, we'd be in real trouble.
Well, a lot of the students who oppose this measure might argue that it might make them feel unsafe, given the potential for a police officer to perhaps misuse the weapons that they're being given. What kind of validity is there to that concern?
It's a legitimate concern. It was my reason I originally was against it. And there is one other part of that concern that I think is real. The truth is that there are some campus police officers, just like there's some metropolitan police officers, who don't like college students. They resent the fact that college students are at GW, a private university, and that can affect their judgment when they're called upon to act in stressful situations. So for me, one of the real questions I have is not whether police officers will be armed, it's whether we're recruiting people who have sufficient talent, sufficient judgment to be able to be police officers, whether they're carrying a gun or not.
And what is the standard protocol for a campus police in terms of the use of deadly force, and how may that be different from a police force such as the Metropolitan Police here in D.C.?
Well, it's a great question. The Metropolitan Police Department is trained to deal with all kinds of situations that one hopes would not arise on a college campus. The GW police force needs to be trained to deal with certain situations that unfortunately are predictable on college campuses, not necessarily here. They need to know what happens with a shooter in the classroom, how to arrange for people to safely exit a building when there is a report of a shooter in that building. And they need to be trained on the proper use of weapons, and that the use of lethal force should be a last resort. And certainly they should be trained that when they're facing an armed suspect, unless they're in imminent danger, they ought to de-escalate as much as possible. Reduces the threat to the officer, it reduces the threat to the suspect, and it reduces the threat to innocent students who are bystanders.
That makes perfect sense. And lastly, given that this was a move that the administration made without any input from the students themselves, is there any kind of risk of legal trouble, perhaps, that the university may face as a result of doing this somewhat secretively?
I don't think there's any legal risk. I say, as a law professor who's been around a long time, that's it. No increased legal risk from not consulting the students. There is always a legal risk from arming a police force on a campus. The biggest risk is that the officers will not be properly trained and that some tragedy will unfold. That's where liability tends to arise.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen. And now we delve into the origins of the fentanyl crisis that is gripping the United States. Leo Cahages has the story.
As the synthetic drug fentanyl continues to claim American lives, some experts say that before focusing on how bad it could get, we need to explore how it all began.
That American citizens need to know that this could have been prevented. We did not need to be here.
While the chemicals used to make fentanyl are largely imported from outside the U.S., the public health crisis also has roots closer to home.
We wouldn't be at this place in time if it were not for the U.S. Opioid industry, and it was an industry consisting of opioid manufacturers, pharmacy chains, and distributors who were making huge amounts of money by selling oxycodone.
Following numerous lawsuits, U.S. pharmaceutical companies like CVS and Walgreens drastically reduced the availability of opioids like oxycodone. This left a void for new players to emerge.
In 2014 and 2015, the Mexican cartels said, hey, there's millions of addicts here in America and they have nowhere to go. It's not like the government during this time period emphasized treatment for these people who were addicted to oxycodone and painkillers. So what transpired basically is the cartel, recognizing a business opportunity, started producing fentanyl.
Despite popular claims that Mexican cartels smuggle fentanyl across the entirety of the U.S.-Mexico border with the help of illegal immigrants, those who have worked at the border say it's not that simple.
The majority of the seizures across the southwest border are at the ports of entry. The other thing that people are surprised about is because you're going through the port of entry, you got to have legal status. And it's mostly U.S. citizens and permanent residents, people who have already gone through the system.
With fentanyl-related deaths still on the rise in the U.S., many experts recommend deploying more public education campaigns that both clarify misconceptions about the crisis and also teach young Americans the dangers of the drug at a younger age. Other experts urge as many people as possible to carry Narcan, a life-saving drug that can be administered to save someone who's having a fentanyl overdose. For Capital News, this has been Leo Cahages.
High-potency marijuana is creating challenges for mental health. Studies done by the CDC say that people are at risk of developing psychosis from marijuana usage. Others are adding that there's a link between heavy use and psychiatric disorders such as depression, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia. THC levels in marijuana have been getting stronger for decades as more states legalize recreational cannabis products. There's been more consumer demand for stronger weed, which raises the risk of individuals developing disorders. Recent data shows that school performance in the district differs greatly between wards, specifically the ones that are underserved and receive less resources. Here's Kon Underwood with more details.
There is a growing issue, not on the government side, but on the education side, an issue not new to the district. Recent statistics show that there is a significant achievement gap between different DC wards. DC is organized into 8 wards, with wards 1 through 6 being the more affluent neighborhoods and wards 7 and 8 being the areas with lower average incomes of less than $100,000. This same pattern is shown in the education sector as well, with wards 7 and 8 scoring the lowest on several statistics like reading and math proficiency scores and access to reading materials. Tyrell Williams, a DC native, notes that schools don't seem to have enough resources available, leading to teachers being overwhelmed and students not getting the individual attention that they need.
It's so many kids in one classroom where the people that needs the attention cannot get it because the teacher is so spread out thin amongst 24 or 48 kids. So it's very difficult, definitely for kids that have, learning disabilities or that needs that extra help.
Daryl Jackson, a former DC public school student, also recounts experiencing a lack of resources. She thinks that there are ways to remedy the education gap in wards 7 and 8.
One, be able to get kids off of the street, not only like during school hours, but also after school hours. And when I say like extracurricular activities, I mean like activities that are like skillful and that they can actually take from high school all the way to college or whatever they want to do post.
In 2019, DC Public Schools launched their Connected Schools model, which seeks to provide community services for not only students, but their families as well.
Is so needed, especially where, resources are lacking, whether that's just transportation issues to not be able to get the medical care you need. Okay, so let's bring the medical care to the school so that students and their families can have access to that, or the mental health counseling. Let's bring in professionals to provide those services.
As our city grapples with the challenge of ensuring equitable education for all of its students, organization programs and dedicated teachers have made great strides in narrowing the gap between underserved wards and their counterparts. And with the COVID pandemic slowly fading, even more organizations are facing a resurgence. This, along with the district's efforts, means that we may see future improvement and increased support in both our schools and our communities. From Washington, D.C., this is Kon Underwood.
A local nonprofit is combating hunger and poverty in the district. Celeste Norian has more.
Food insecurity is an issue that thousands of people face in the district.
We're never going to feed our way out of hunger because hunger is just a symptom of a deeper root cause called poverty.
DC Central Kitchen is a nonprofit that combats hunger and poverty in Washington, D.C. Alex Moore, the Chief Development Officer, says they serve about 15,000 meals a day.
Scratch-cooked, locally sourced meals in now 30 DC schools. We're able to deliver fresh, nutritious meals to dozens of homeless shelters, halfway houses, youth programs, and other nonprofits across the city.
In addition to bringing nutritious foods to high-need areas of the city, they also provide hands-on culinary job training.
where we work with members of our community who have experienced incredible barriers to employment, histories of homelessness, addiction, incarceration, and trauma, as well as young people who are disconnected from both work and school.
67-year-old Billy Johnson was one person who went through the training.
I needed something to change my life. I had to find a way to reinvent me.
Now he is a production cook for the Healthy Corners program, which brings fresh fruits and vegetables to corner stores.
We do cantaloupe, pineapples, grapes, honeydew melons. We just started on the peppers.
The Uptown Mart right behind me is one of just 53 corner stores across DC that offers fresh produce from the Healthy Corners program. Now these fresh fruits and vegetables are offered at below market pricing to make it more affordable and accessible.
We have a lot of people that are over there dealing with a lot of food insecurities, and we try to give them another option.
According to a study from the Capital Area Food Bank, 32% of people in the greater DC area have experienced food insecurity in the last year.
Food costs are naturally higher due to economic pressures. We're seeing a reduction in pandemic-inspired public support services, and the economy simply hasn't come back in the same way for many of the communities that we're most invested in.
By next year, DC Central Kitchen plans to expand even further. Their goal is to produce 25,000 meals in a single day.
We can change some people's lives by eating. A good meal can go a long way towards changing a person's life.
Celeste Norian, Capital News.
Another local organization called Fresh Farm is tackling food insecurity. In neighborhoods across the city, they provide DC area residents with fresh, affordable food at local markets. Ethan Ben has the story.
In Foggy Bottom, Wednesday isn't just hump day. Orange signs point passersby to fresh food, local produce, and empanadas.
I mean, it's Empanada Wednesday. How can I not be here?
Here is the Foggy Bottom Metro Station. DC area farmers and producers work with the nonprofit Fresh Farm to transform the space into a market. Each Wednesday, locals stop by to sample what's on offer. But the market isn't just a way to expand your palate. For some people, it can be a lifeline.
Shopping locally and working with local farmers can help cut costs for budget-conscious city owners.
Nearly 1 in 3 people living in the DC area experienced food insecurity last year. That's according to a study from the Capital Area Food Bank. There's not just one cause for the problem either. According to the Food Bank, inflation, the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the end of government benefits are taking their toll. And that's where Fresh Farm comes in.
So you can use SNAP here, you can use EBT. We also do a Produce Plus program in the summer, as long as a senior and a WIC program.
Fresh Farm also doubles benefits like SNAP. If you take $30 off your card, you'll get $60 to spend on local produce. But it's not just how much food costs, it's where it is. Out of DC's 85 grocery stores, only 8 stores are located in Ward 7 and 8, and there are only 6 stores east of the Anacostia River.
We run 27 farmers markets in the DMV area, most of them being in DC, a couple in Virginia, and 1 in Maryland, Silver Spring. We have some farm stands like in food deserts in Ward 7 and 8, and so that can really bring food to people who might not have other access to it.
When prices are too high or grocery stores too far away, markets like these can benefit both farmers and shoppers. From Washington, this is Ethan Ben.
The restaurant industry faced a challenging year in D.C. 2023 was marked by closures and uncertainties. But what does the future hold? Daria Nastasia brings us more on the story.
In Washington, D.C., the restaurant industry faced a tough year in 2023, with more closures than the previous year. Locals in neighborhoods, including Adams Morgan, were left with a sense of loss for beloved establishments.
I think it means the loss of business, the loss of people, the loss of our community.
The business of restaurants in DC, I feel, is very competitive and is very expensive.
Many attribute the closures to factors such as crime, escalating costs, and Initiative 82, aiming to incrementally raise restaurant employee wages until 2027. The Restaurant Association Metropolitan Washington was actively advocating for policy changes and fostering community connections to address the challenges faced by local restaurants.
It's, of course, our job to promote our restaurants, whether it's through meetups, happy hours. As we continue to do that, it's also important for us to communicate to our restaurants, to our members, ways that they could be encouraging or attracting foot traffic as well.
Despite these hurdles, new data from Yelp paints a more optimistic picture for the future of DC's restaurant industry by looking at the longer term. In 2023, 1,157 new restaurants were listed on Yelp in the DC metro area, surpassing the 2019 figure of 1,091. DC stood out on Yelp's nationwide list, boasting 42 new restaurants for every 100,000 residents, compared to only 22 in New York State. Overall, new businesses in the DC area witnessed a 31% increase from 2019. Moon Rabbit, a modern Vietnamese restaurant, exemplifies resilience. After closing at the Wharf's Intercontinental Hotel last spring, Chef Kevin Tien reopened in Penn Quarter with a revamped menu. Tien emphasizes that while restaurants are reopening, dining out post-COVID is different.
There's a lot of factors that go into the closure of a restaurant. I've had one restaurant close because of COVID, right? COVID kind of like flipped the restaurant world upside down. And then I've closed another restaurant because, you know, there just like wasn't enough foot traffic.
As the restaurant industry navigates these challenges, signs of recovery are emerging. Perhaps your next favorite restaurant is awaiting to be discovered, showcasing the industry's resilience in the aftermath of the pandemic. For Capital News, I'm Daria Nastasia.
Fans of seafood in DC can rest easy thanks to a new lease at the city's fish market. Oliver Grover has the story.
Located alongside the Potomac River in southwest DC, the Wharf is a staple for residents of the city. Home to restaurants and residents alike, the waterfront on the Potomac serves as a gathering hub for anyone looking for a night out in the district. Over the past 16 years, the Wharf has been the center of one of the city's biggest ever neighborhood development projects, with over $3 billion being invested into new residential and commercial enterprises in the area. Now expected to host 10 million visitors annually and being home to world-famous brands such as Chef Gordon Ramsay's Hell's Kitchen restaurant, the Wharf is a far cry from the location it was just 10 years ago. But as so much along the waterfront changes, one vital part of the Wharf has remained constant. Operating since 1805, the Municipal Fish Market is the oldest operating fish market in the United States. A key part of the Wharf since its beginning, it's hard for some residents to imagine the area without the market.
I love it. Fresh seafood you can get it cooked here, you can take it home, but they always help you out. They give you everything that you need, all the materials, all the tools, and the knowledge about what you're about to cook.
As the Wharf continues to expand, the market has an assured place in its future. Jesse Taylor Seafood, the sole vendor at the fish market, just signed a new 20-year lease in September.
It means that we're not the only ones that have faith in us, you know what I mean? They feel pretty good about us being here for 20 years, so hopefully go longer than that. They're excited about it.
Thanks to the lease, Jesse Taylor felt confident enough to purchase a new boat for their business, allowing them to store twice as much product and deliver seafood straight to customers on the water.
As so much as DC Wharfs continues to develop and change, with new restaurants being added every couple of months, the DC Fish Market offers a nice historic staple that residents can rely on to be here with affordable prices and good seafood. In Washington, D.C., this is Oliver Grover.
Up next, we explore the passionate community fostered by secondhand items at the Georgetown Flea Market. Molly Resnik shares what keeps residents coming back.
Nestled at the edge of Georgetown, the Georgetown Flea Market welcomes a community of locals and visitors who gather every Sunday to explore an array of treasures. From vintage clothing to unique trinkets, each stall holds a story waiting to be discovered.
I also like that these objects have history to them, and that it's been used by other people, and I just think it has a lot more character.
In an era of fast fashion and disposable trends, a growing number of shoppers are coming to the market to seek a more sustainable and long-lasting approach to style.
I definitely think people should start shopping more sustainably. Every time I come to these markets, I'm always looking for a leather jacket, a piece that could last me forever.
As the flea market continues to thrive, vendors are witnessing a surge in community engagement.
I've been doing this probably 25 to 30 years. It's a huge change, huge growth.
For vendors at the market, the increasing popularity is not just about business. It's a testament to the vibrant community spirit that continues to flourish in Georgetown.
I used to come here with my mom. My mom used to set up. I used to come here with her when I was 5. This one in particular is part of the community.
It's always a sense of belonging over here, or in any thrifting area in general, because everybody there is usually into vintage pieces or art pieces, and it's a chance to show off all this cool stuff.
You can find the Georgetown Flea Market at the edge of Georgetown every Sunday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Come explore the intersection of sustainability and style and feel the growing sense of community for yourself. I'm Molly Resnik in Washington, D.C.
A DC-based organization is making sustainable living accessible in the Southeast. A Peace LLC is developing 9 apartment buildings and a wellness center in Anacostia, a historically underprivileged community. According to investor DC Green Bank, the project will provide residents access to housing that is affordable and uses, quote, clean energy. The development will also offer residents food and education resources.
Amid the ongoing climate crisis, George Washington University has launched a program that transforms student journalists into environmental storytellers. Lauren Compoli brings us more on the story.
Forward is a project that not only molds the storytellers of tomorrow, but also sheds light on critical issues facing our planet. It's hosted at the George Washington University and is making waves as it teaches, celebrates, and rewards environmental storytelling by college students.
I'm a journalist. I worked for many years at the Voice of America, CNN, AP, mostly at CNN, and I've done a lot of environmental coverage. When I came to GW, I wanted to put together a project that combined my knowledge and interest in media, my fascination with the planet that we live on, students, faculty, and the incredible place and platform that a university provides. So I started Planet Forward.
Founded in 2009 by Frank Sesnell, Planet Forward serves as the premier engagement tool for GW's sustainability initiatives. More than just a project, it's a catalyst for change, empowering new voices, and leading a global conversation on the planet's future.
But I think, basically, Planet Forward's mission is essentially to, promote, student storytellers who tell environmental stories.
By engaging a diverse audience of college students from across the nation, Planet Forward utilizes storytelling, media, and educational events to shed light on the stories of invention and innovation that can move our planet forward.
My dream for Planet Forward is that everybody, regardless of what their discipline or their background is, learns the power of communication and storytelling. That you can inform people, you can engage people, you can discover from the Galapagos or your backyard what's happening and convey that. That in a world of mis and disinformation, in a world where people are questioning science and where we're so deeply polarized, that by telling stories, we can create understanding and empathy and connection. And maybe, just maybe, come together to make the decisions that we're going to need to make as a planet to address climate change and these other things and to actually move the planet forward.
Planet Forward has united a nationwide community of universities and students, igniting their fervor for storytelling and journalism, as well as to underscore the responsibility we all share in affecting change and propelling our planet forward. I'm Laura Capoli, Washington, D.C.
A cultural festival at the National Museum of Asian Art is grabbing locals' attention. Naila Mohammed has more of the story.
Thousands of guests are expected at the National Museum of Asian Art to take part in the Lunar New Year celebration. Lunar New Year is a 15-day celebration marked by many traditions, different regions across Asia celebrating in a variety of ways. For guests of all ages and staff alike, the event is something to look forward to.
It's definitely a time that's similar to the Western New Year, right? It's a time to reflect, and it's a time to hope, and it's a time to spend with your family.
Traditional garments flood the hallways of the museum as guests make their way throughout the event. This year is the Year of the Dragon, a figure that symbolizes power, strength, and wisdom. The colors gold and red hold great significance. The museum also offers a variety of activities for guests, including crafts for children, discussion panels, and vendors. One attraction everyone looks forward to is the lion dance.
I think that the lions are very traditional. The lion dance is very well known for the New Year. And they bestow good fortune to those who come to see them. To conceptualize a program and then to have 15,000 people show up and enjoy that program is really cool to me. But outside of that, the lion dance, can't beat that. I love those guys.
Freer's National Mall Plaza is filled with music and onlookers during the performance.
The lion dance just happened in the plaza behind me.
where hundreds of people gathered with their families to watch the performance. For anyone who couldn't make it, the American Art Museum will have more festivities. I'm Naila Muhammad in Washington.
For the past 3 years, college athletes have been able to use their name, image, and likeness for financial gain. However, numerous challenges remain for the system. Ashley Tobin brings us the full story.
When most people think of college athletes profiting from marketing campaigns, they typically think of traditional advertising, like this.
Want to touch the win bar? Lose sleep, lose count, lose sweat.
But for the majority of college athletes engaging in name, image, and likeness, things are a little less intense. Take Mia Cremona, for example. As a member of the rowing team at George Washington University, she exemplifies the countless college athletes using their personal brand to capitalize on partnerships with companies through the use of social media platforms.
I think it's just nice to have like a little bit of a supplementary income because I don't quite have time for a full-time job at the moment.
She says she has made about $600 through her partnerships with 3 companies, which may seem small, but it contributes to the estimated $1 billion paid to college athletes this year alone. In 2021, the Supreme Court ruled against the NCAA rule that prohibited student athletes like Mia from making money off their brand. The move allows college athletes to authorize the use of their name, image, and likeness to things like brand deals, advertisements, clothing, and much more. Experts say that the benefits of student athletes being able to profit off their name extends far beyond the money they would receive from potential sponsors.
I think it's great that athletes can finally do what every other student has been able to do forever. This is a right to publicity, and so now student athletes are able to kind of opportunize on that right.
With Dr. Emma Gill adding, the process of branding yourself and expanding your identity, really understanding what NIL is all about and how to pursue it, has been positive for student athletes. However, just 3 years after the policy shift, coaches and administrators are warning of potential harms. The more money that gets pumped into the NIL landscape, the more experts believe college sports will become an arms race of sorts that will enable top athletic programs to soar while leaving others far behind.
I think there definitely need to be regulations that are specifically aimed at protecting the integrity of college sports and protecting the student athlete as an individual.
Due to the unregulated nature of NIL, it is often referred to as the Wild Wild West. But this could be changing soon as Congress continues to hear testimony from experts and student athletes regarding potential guidelines for the future. Reporting from Washington, I'm Ashley Tobin.
And we have big news in local sports. The Washington Wizards and Capitals are staying in D.C. Monumental Sports Entertainment and Mayor Muriel Bowser agreed to a $515 million deal to expand the Capital One Arena and hospitality operations in Chinatown. In December of 2023, Monumental announced the team's departure to Alexandria, Virginia, but now they're expected to stay until 2050.
Storms have been raging across the country with tornadoes in Oklahoma, extreme rainfall in Kentucky and California, and snow in the Northeast. Here's Jacob Eggers with an analysis of the current weather pattern. Jacob?
Thanks, Stefan. As we head into the spring season, we are seeing some extreme weather across the country. The weather in Washington, D.C. this past week, however, has been nice, hitting a high of 80 degrees on Monday. We're not quite into spring yet, as we can expect rain and cooler weather this evening, with temperatures around 55 degrees as a cold front moves through. Later on in the week, we are going to see some warmer weather. Bring out your favorite shades or maybe your favorite Hawaiian shirt, because Thursday is going to be expected to be a high of 77 degrees. I know I already have my shirt picked out.
Well, thank you for that weather update, Jacob. And I'm looking forward to seeing that shirt. Tune in next week for more of the latest breaking and trending stories of the day. I'm Stefan Nye.
And I'm Sejal Govindharao. For Capital News, have a good night.